let me share a little more. That's not fair. Just throw that out there. Why am I so rabid in my support of the Second Amendment? Well, again, I grew up hunting and fishing, and kind of the usual thing a kid does, especially up in the sand hills. But it wasn't just that. It was as I went into the military. We did a lot of competitive shooting. I was fortunate enough to be on several national championship teams, a world championship with a sniper rifle, and be selected to help coach the Olympic shooting team, to command the National Marksmanship Center. So, as far as credentials with the Second Amendment, I feel very strong in many ways. I mean, in my family, you are a life member of the NRA, whether you want to be or not. So, I just think there's certain things that are a requirement. I have been in so many countries where they do have the laws in place that do not allow them to have the basic weapons. You can have a .22 rifle, and yet you're just as scared when you go into certain parts of town there. You're just in a situation where there's nothing you can do about it. When you saw the riots in the UK a few years ago, I can't imagine how terrifying that would be to just have groups roaming the streets, destroying businesses and attacking people, and you have no way to defend yourself. So I have zero flexibility with the Second Amendment. It's written, I live by it, and that's the way I'll see it.
I can pretty much agree with Tom on the Second Amendment rights. I have more guns than I can oil or shoot anymore. But those riots in the streets would be a lot worse if they were carrying AKs that were with full clips. And we don't want a country where you bring guns to political rallies. So I don't believe we need any more regulation, because we can't afford can't enforce the regulations we have. But folks, we need to know that the culture of violence is really dangerous, and we have to be awfully careful about cultivating it.
Gentlemen, I'm going to start with some audience questions now, some of the questions from the public, and I will just read them as they are written. Are you aware of what's going on in our skies with the chemtrails and HAARP, or what the mainstream media likes to refer to as geoengineering? Question mark. This is an issue that's not only affects people's health, but the weather as well. It's going on all over the world, and we'd like to get your thoughts on the subject.
This one will be yours.
Thanks, Paul.
You mean the trails behind the jet aircraft?
I believe that's what he's referring to. It's one of the questions from the audience. It wasn't in my notes.
Yes. Well, quite honestly, there's a lot of things. I'm not sure exactly what I'm talking about here, but quite honestly, we have vapor, and we have a lot of things coming out of diesel, jet fuel, other motors. We do need to be careful of our environment, and it's a long time until we can't fix it after we break it. If that's what you're talking about, I think we need to take very good care of our environment. And if not, I don't know what we're talking about.
I suppose that it's not a good political thing to say. I don't have a clue, but I don't have a clue either. It could be, seeding of clouds. I'm not absolutely sure what it is, and even after reading it, I still don't know what it is. So I don't think you deserve to have someone babble about something they don't know about.
This question reads, one concern I have is that our elected representatives pass a law, then government agencies like OSHA, EPA, Bureau of Land Management create ordinances that were never voted on by Congress and essentially make laws. How do you propose any limit that agencies' growth and their power?
Well, I think they're spot on with that comment there. I mean, how many times does the Congress have visibility on what's being enforced by either the EPA or OSHA? The organization is this self-licking ice cream cone that builds this monster that they are, and then they fine people because that's how they justify their positions. And why do we have an agency that's allowed to do that? I think we have a requirement to have, say, OSHA, because you have people out there that have businesses or whatever who are more than willing to cut corners and put people at risk. But unfortunately, what's happening now is you're having small businesses that are forced to close because the fines are so great or so repetitive that they bleed them dry. And they're living on such a small margin now that it doesn't take much to throw them over the edge. So we have put ourselves in a position where these agencies become a standalone entity that decide things, make regulations, and then enforce those regulations. Now, I think it's probably a monster too big for Congress to read every regulation. They can't even read the bills they pass. So this needs to be one of those issues where you need to case by case figure out what they're doing, especially those things that are so negatively affecting small business, farmers, ranchers, and have a method of going back and stopping the EPA, the OSHA folks, whoever it is that's enforcing this. Now, you can take that a step farther and really question, say, NSA. They're again enforcing what they perceive as a necessary evil with complete oversight of your phone calls and your email, things that I don't think have any business a part of. So we have a process in place with oversight committees to try and figure out where this overuse of their powers is going on. And I don't think people tend to pay the fines and not really peel back the layers and figure out the evil that really is kind of self-generating some of these regulations and problems. So ultimately, that's what we have to do. And your only representative is going to be, you got two senators and a congressman. That's your voice. So they need to be the ones that are willing to fight that good fight.
Yes, that sounds correct to me. And overreach in bureaucracy is a function of being overzealous, I believe. It should be the administration's oversight to take care of that, to watch it. But in one case this year in Nebraska, Senator Johans hollered at, I don't know whether he hollered at him or not, but at OSHA to back them off a family farm because they had grain bins, and they considered that a grain elevator instead of a family farm, and they tried to put them under those regulations. That's the job of somebody like us. If we're elected, that's what our job is. And I think that's our job.
This is another question from the audience. Do you consider Social Security to be an entitlement? Mr. Sullivan, we'll start with you.
Absolutely not. Social Security is a contract. It's a contract made with the folks that pay the taxes and pay into it. If the folks that figure out the rates are not charging enough, they should charge more. The tax should be higher if it has to be. But that is not an entitlement. It's a contract. This country, the 3rd District, the state of Nebraska, our word is our bond. And this country's given its word that we're going to take care of senior citizens, and we better do it.
I agree with Mark. I think you paid in your whole life. That money was to be set aside in a special savings account for you, and you're to enjoy that when you retire. And the fact that they decided to throw it in the general fund and spend it like drunken sailors, that bad's on them.
With the drawdown in Afghanistan and the end of combat operations in Iraq, more of our armed forces are transitioning back home and into the civilian world. Does the United States need to do a better job? Does Washington, D.C. need to do a better job in making sure that our veterans are given access to adequate employment and means to health care? We'll start with you, Colonel Brewer.
Well, I guess maybe I'm somewhat qualified for this question. I will tell you that I'm troubled by a couple of things. As we come back in, so many veterans who are looking for work are challenged because if at any point, as you're coming off active duty and you're leaving the theater of operations and you're no longer wearing the uniform, as they do these interviews with you, if you tell them that you've had a traumatic brain injury, if you tell them that you have post-traumatic stress, you are instantly tagged as having some type of mental disorder. With that comes your loss is your privilege to own a firearm, your ability to get a job. You're essentially shunned because you're honest with the representatives who are supposed to be taking care of you as you transition back into civilian life. And I just think that's horrible. You do what you're asked to do, and if you're riding in a vehicle and it hits a roadside bomb and your head is injured, that shouldn't ruin you for the rest of your life because of your service. I got news for you. The VA will give you a tiny percentage of disability for that, but in reality, you're a marked person for life that can never have the normal things others have. And your sin is you served your country. So that's part of the concern I would have with the way that they're treating the soldiers coming home right now. And the other part is, many of these kids come with such great skills, because right now, unlike before in the military, if you're an 11 Bravo infantryman, you're going to have pretty limited skills. But in this day and age, with all of the technology we have, whether it's figuring out how to run multi-channel burst radios with satellite antennas and all these capabilities, you're going to be so much better prepared to go out in the civilian world and do the things that they're going to ask of you to do than 2 generations ago when they came off battlefields. So lots of talent, and a lot of it goes to waste because they're not given those opportunities they should have. There's not a clear pathway for these kids as they come back to be able to find a job easily. There are a few things in place to help them with some vocational training, but once in a while you hear a good news story where some company embraces having veterans as a part of their team, and they do great things. But unfortunately, it's on a pretty limited basis. You see some of the programs like the Wounded Warrior Program that has done a great job of helping kids transition back that have got severe wounds. But why do we have a Wounded Warrior Program when we've got a federal government that ought to be doing the same thing for our kids?
I concur with you, Congressman Brewer, and it was very well said.
Getting back to questions about the audience, or questions from the audience, and this one dealing a little bit with agriculture. What, if anything, if elected, would you do about genetically modified foods, GMO'd foods? We'll start with you, Mr. Sullivan.
Yeah, I knew they'd throw this in at me. We, indeed, on our farm, use GMOs constantly. There's a lot of controversy about it. The biggest thing I can see, the most important thing, is isolation and resistance management and separating the crop from other crops that people want to be non-GMO, organic, for example, crops. I believe the science is safe on it. I strongly believe they're correct. I wouldn't use them if I didn't. We use hardly any organophosphates, hardly any commercial pesticides, herbicides, very, very little compared to what we did when I started farming because of GMOs. Now, what it is, it's selective breeding or hybridization, as Luther Burbank thought of back in the history, but it's accelerated. They use a gene gun to make this happen. Now, you don't have to agree with me. I'm not a scientist. I won't argue with you on that. But the main things are keep the food supply safe, be sure and isolate be sure and work against pesticide resistance and GMO resistance. And we do that regularly. And I think the farmers are good stewards of it. I think the science is good. That's my belief.